that really quick and take our little survey, we would really appreciate that. We're just trying to develop data on any other types of talks that you'd like to see. Does the time of day work? And I'm stalling really just so these ladies can get in before Dr. Ashley starts. Hi, come on in. Sorry. We reserved you some seats right here. No apologies necessary. Thank you for being here. So please take that survey. It's real quick, and it'll just help us continue to make these presentations better and things that you guys want to keep coming out to. So, okay, now it's all you. Thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Chris. So thank you everyone for showing up. So tonight what I want to talk about is basically a series of excavations that we have conducted at the University of North Florida at the Armelino site. So the name of this archaeological site is called the Armelino site. It was named after a family who owns part of the property. It's on Big Talbot Island, but really most of the site is located on Big Talbot Island State Park. So after really off and on for almost 20 years of working out there, I feel really, really confident that I can say that we are at the Mocama speaking Timucua community of Sarabay. And Sarabay does show up in early French and Spanish documents. So it is a Mocama community. So I think our excavations right now have really provided kind of an on-the-ground window into kind of Mocama life as well as the layout of the community. So what we're really looking at here, and I'll go through this in more detail, but I think the snapshot that we have is probably from about 1580 to 1620. That's the core area that we've been excavating. And really it's been over the last 4 years, but as you'll see, we started a few years ago. Just a couple of basic things. This is part of a project we're doing. So at University of North Florida, we have an archaeology lab, and I think we're really strong in terms of our research that we do. So we are very, very active in this area. Really, our research focuses on northeastern Florida. So one of the projects we have is called the Mocama Archaeological Project. And what we're trying to do here is to reconstruct the social landscape. So this is a multidisciplinary project. So it's myself, Dr. Bosey, who's in the history department, Aaron Broadwell, sometimes we'll tap into him, who does linguistics. So we're really trying to locate archaeological sites, indigenous communities that date from really the late 1500s into the really early 1700s. All right, so it's mainly going to be Timucua, Mocama speaking Timucua, but we also see that there were Wally Indians who were along the Georgia coast who will move into this area in the late 15 and into the 1600s. We'll also see Yamasee, who are from the interior part of Georgia, move to the Georgia coast and eventually work their way in here. So really there are a series of indigenous peoples who consider northeastern Florida their ancestral homelands, not just the Timucua, but the Wally and the Yamasee. So we're trying to locate these sites, we're trying to reconstruct the social geography, the social landscape of this time, and we're also trying to look at the histories, the religion, the politics, culture, everything that's going on right now that's in the face of European contact, missionization, colonization that's going on. Major changes are happening, and we're trying to look at it here. Also, we're trying to really foreground indigenous people, all right? Most of the time, when Europeans arrive, the history of northeastern Florida shifts. And instead of really having the indigenous people at forefront, we tend to stand behind the European colonists and see everything through their eyes. So we're starting to see them, through their shoulders and kind of see what's going on. We want to shift that around. We want to put the indigenous people here in the forefront. If we look at the indigenous history of northeastern Florida, it goes back almost 13,000 years. So what that means is 97% of the human history of northeastern Florida is an indigenous history. All right? So our approach is we're not trying to take away Europeans. We're not trying to take away colonization. We're just trying to put these indigenous histories on equal footing, these larger histories that we know about. All right, so we're putting them front and center in this entanglement that's going on. All right, so that's really a big part of our project. And so one thing that was happening with this project is it was probably about 2016 or 2017, someone came up to me and said, hey, what does a Mocama Timucua community in this area, what does it really look like? And I was like, well, we've done some testing at this site, we think it's Sarabay back in the late 90s, but we don't have a lot of good detail from it. So based on that, I really wanted to go back to Sarabay, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is kind of returning back to Sarabay in 2020 and what we really learned about the local Mocama. So some really quick background. So Timucua is a language. Timucua really isn't like a tribe with a leading chief and all of that. Timucua is a language that's spoken of a really broad area. So Timucua, really, we're probably looking a little bit north of Orlando, a little bit a little bit east of Tallahassee, then up into southeastern Georgia, the Okefenokee Swamp area, just south of the Altamaha River. So it's really a large area. Within Timucua, there are various dialects. So if we were in Gainesville, we would be talking about the Potano-speaking Timucua. Here in our area, it's the Mocama. Mocama is actually an indigenous word. Mocama means sea, S-E-A. So it's the maritime dialect of the Timucua language. So saying Timucua isn't wrong. Sometimes we just say Mocama because it provides more specificity. You know, we're talking about this area, all right? There's also the Agua Salada, which clearly is not an indigenous word. That's the saltwater speaking Timucua, and that's the Timucua that are at Sloy and St. Augustine. So there are different dialects here along the coast. Our dialect is probably just south of the mouth of the St. Johns River into northeastern Florida, coastal northeastern Florida, and then into southeastern Georgia. So it's spread over this really broad area. Timucua speakers are probably one of the first ones to really be impacted by European colonization, right? I think the northeast Florida coast, the southeast Georgia coast, that's ground zero for early Spanish and French colonization. And they're going to bear the brunt of that initial wave of colonization. They're going to be hit by diseases. They're also going to be hit by outmigration, where people just don't want to be part of this new world order, and they move into the interior. All right? So there's Mocama right there. Couple of things about, just go through these. Mocama, just some background. I think there's a lot of things that are out there that have been written about the Mocama based on just a straight reading of the Spanish documents or French documents, and I think that's really, really misleading. So I think we've been really critical of the documents. We're using archaeology. So based on that, I think we can start to call out things that we see that I really think are going to be true. So a couple things I think we can say about the Mocama or the broader Timucua as well is that they have hereditary leaders. So they have matrilineal clans. All right, matrilineal means you reckon your descent through your mother's line. So the way that works, mothers and fathers, husbands, wives are from different clans. And you, whether you're a male or female, you affiliate with your mother's clan. So your relatives are your mother's relatives, both males and females, but through the mother's line, her mother's line, her mother's mother's lines. And so that's how it works. All right? They have these honored councils, right? And the chief is called a holada. So one thing we really tried to do is reintroduce indigenous words into our research, basically to prioritize indigenous peoples. All right? So they have these rank clans. It appears to be that Deer clan is the highest ranking clan, and most of the time, holadas come from these clans. All right? They live in towns and villages. We make a distinction here. We're really trying to understand the diversity that goes on, the variability that goes on within these communities. So they're not all the same. So for us, a town has a council house, which means within that town, there's a large public building that basically the holata would hold court there. There would be various religious practices. There would be social gatherings. There would be recreation there. Villages are smaller communities that are kind of tied to those towns, and they don't have their own council house. All right? So there are these kind of smaller communities that are tied to these larger council houses. The two big leaders, when Europeans arrived, are Satariwa, who's probably somewhere near the mouth of the St. Johns River. It's always been thought about the broader Mayport area, and that may be the case. We still haven't found what we think is Satariwa's home village. The other major holata is more to the northern part of the Mocama area, and this is Tacatacaru. And Tacatacaru is at the very south end of Cumberland Island. So this is it. There are hunters and gatherers who probably about 1450 start growing corn for the first time. So corn is an incredibly late addition to kind of the food-getting repertoire of what's going on here, right? So everyone thinks, well, in the interior southeastern United States, in Georgia, in Alabama, into the Midwest area, they're growing corn probably about 1000 AD. We don't see it here until 400 years later, so it's a much later phenomenon here. A lot of times people say, why did it take them so long to grow corn? My take is, why did they start growing corn at all? Because the estuary is so rich and bountiful that what is the need for it? And I think the need for corn, or why they developed corn and started using corn and growing corn, is not for calories and not for anything like that, that it's going to be more political related. And then they have these great social networks. So these indigenous people who are living here in Jacksonville are not just living by the marsh and fishing and growing their corn. They have these interaction networks that are connecting them to family members, to other members of Timucua speakers, through these great interaction networks. So marriage will align them. If we go back 500 years earlier to 1,000 years ago, the interaction networks that are here are stretching all over the eastern United States. We have connections here 1,000 years ago to Cahokia, which is in St. Louis. We have stuff coming in from copper coming in from the Great Lakes. We just got galena that we're finding at a site here in Jacksonville dating to 1,000 years ago that's coming from the Ozark Mountains. We just had that source. So these are these great, phenomenal interaction networks. We have this site called the Milco Complex. However, those great, really long-distance interaction networks, they break down. There's all this internal kind of chaos in a way that goes on in the interior southeast United States among indigenous peoples themselves, so it breaks down. So when we talk about the Mocama and the Timucua in the 1500s, they saw these interaction networks. Now this is still going on, but it's not nearly as far along as it had been 500 years earlier. So it's an incredibly dynamic history. How many people have seen this? Yeah, how many people have seen this? This is your takeaway. Oops. There's your takeaway of it. This is not it. These are these debris engravings that date to 1591. They're supposed to be the snapshot of the Timucua. This is nothing more than 16th century clip art. This is nothing that really shows what we're doing here. This is everyone's mental image of what a Timucua village looks like, or Timucua community looks like. What's interesting, so Timucua speakers are in the Gainesville area, a little bit farther to the west. So Hernando de Soto goes through Timucua, okay? Not our area of Timucua, but he goes to Timucua areas. So you look at all these Spaniards who have gone through, all the French, not one of them mentioned a Timucua community with that wall around it. This is the only one. And I can show you, I'm not going to here, but I can show you sketches from South America that this is based on. All right? So a lot of these things really don't apply to this area. They think that all indigenous people are the same, so they kind of use some of this imagery and sketches from other areas to kind of convey what they're trying to say. So this is the big takeaway, that their communities don't look like this. And I'm going to try to show you what I think they look like, or what we think they look like based on our work. All right? Real quick, to kind of contextualize the site that we're on in the Mocama, is that we know that Jean Ribaud comes here. How long is Jean Ribaud here in Jacksonville? You may know? Everyone knows Jean, I guess, Ribaud. Yeah. Jean Ribaud. How long is he here?
2 days.
2 days. He's only here 2 days. He's here 2 days. We name all this stuff after him. He comes back and he's here 2 more days, and then he gets killed. So he's only here for about a week the entire time. So he's here for a short period of time. He leaves, and then it's his second in command, Rene Lonier, who actually comes back and establishes the La Caroline colony, or what we call Fort Caroline. So that only lasts 15 months, all right? So we have some writings that are based out of Fort Caroline. I don't know how many people know, but Fort Caroline lasts 15 months. Do you know the Spanish take it over, and they last for another 4 years? When they first take it over, they accidentally burn it down. But they rebuild it, and it's in the same spot. So it's Fort San Mateo. So we have documentation from both La Caroline and San Mateo that talks about the indigenous people in the area. And in terms of our talk tonight, we get the early French. This is low down the air, 1564 and 65. Makes several references to Sarabay. It's spelled various ways, but it seems to be somewhat consistent with the place that they're talking about. So from Fort Caroline, they talk about, hey, the mill, they don't have a word for corn at the time, so they have a generic grain word. It's ripening in this community. Another instance, they talk about, hey, we go to near the village of Sarabay to collect clay. There are a lot of meetings between the French and various Timucua Holadas, which they call kings, and one of them that you commonly see is Sarabay. So we hear this. Oh, we're going to see this community of Sarabay. It's basically on the north side of the river, so it's north of St. John's River, and it's on an arm of the river to the north, which is what today would be the intracoastal waterway. So it's about 1.5 to 2 leagues. So it kind of puts it in that area. It's on an island. So we're knowing it's going to be one of these barrier islands north of the St. John's River. All right? but they just kind of tease us with some of that information. All right, then we have the Spanish arrive. All right, so the Spanish here in 1565, the French are gone now. The Spanish, what they initially are going to do is to start to colonize through missionization, right? So they start doing this for about 20 years with Jesuits. It doesn't really work out. So it's not until 1587 that they really start to kind of step up the missionization. What we do know is that between about 1566, 67, and almost to 1580, there's basically a war that's going on between the Mocama in this area and the Spanish. Okay? So they're really going after each other. Something happens in the 1580s, and we start to see leading Huladas inviting Friar in to live. And so we see missionization start. Okay? The way I think missions are somewhat of a misnomer. Everyone thinks, oh, they're building these big mission communities and everyone's going to come to the mission. The way the Spanish do it is they're saying, hey, we're going to basically work within the existing settlement structure of the indigenous people in this area. So typically what you have is in an area, you have a number one and major town, and it kind of controls surrounding villages. So they want to ensconce themselves to basically put themselves within this larger community. Okay? And that's what happened. It's usually through having a Hualata leader that can invite them in. So that's what happens here. But when they move into those communities, there is one priest there. There is still the town council house. They built a church. They built a convento for that one priest to live in. So the time period that I am talking about, 1580, 1620, there was one priest in this area living in San Juan del Puerto on Fort George Island. There's another priest that's going to be living at Tacatacaru on Cumberland Island. There's going to be a few more living on communities really in northern Georgia. And St. Augustine, maybe 100 and 120 people. So during this time, this is still an indigenous world, okay, with indigenous networks going on and everything like that. All right? So this is the structure. So we're going to start seeing that Alamacani is where there's going to be the priests moving in. And Alamacani in 1587 becomes San Juan del Puerto, at least in terms of the writings by the Spanish. Then we'll have San Pedro de Mocama on Cumberland Island. Eventually we get Santa Maria, about 1610 on Amelia Island. And then San Buenaventura de Guadalquivir is on St. Simon's Island, about 1610 as well. They'll eventually all contract down to San Juan del Puerto. Incredibly dynamic time that's going on here. All right, so if we just kind of look at the social geography really quick and what we know. So you have this priest named Pareja, and in 1602, he pens this letter. It's about a 4-page letter. He's writing it to the crown. And basically in this letter, he's saying, things are going great here. Once I introduce them to, in his words, the joys of heaven and the pains of hell, they come flocking to us. So it's a little bit of an exaggeration, okay? But everything's going great. But what he says that helps us, he goes, from my base here at Alamacani, San Juan, I visit 9 neighboring villages, okay? They're called visitas in Spanish parlance because he's visiting them. He goes there to proselytize, to baptize, to preach. And 4 of them that he talks about are the closest one. One is San Pablo, which is Queens Harbor Yacht and Country Club. Another is San Mateo, which is probably in the Fulton area. San Mateo is probably in close proximity to San Mateo the Fort, which is basically where Fort Caroline was. Veracruz, which is on National Park Service property. And then you have Sarabay. So in his letter, he says that Sarabay is the closest one. It's only 1/4 of a league away on the island to the north. So that's what we know. So we know that we got this nice little bit from him. Kind of give us a little bit of sociology, not a lot of specifics, but we know that these 9 communities, and I think we feel really confident that we know where 4 of them are modern day. Okay, here's a map. So this map is from 1605. Again, you see this is the last community here in Duval County, the last indigenous Native American community here. And that's Pilihariba, and this is Queens Harbor Yacht and Country Club right there. All right, so that's where it was located. On this map, St. John's River, the Isle of San Juan, the island of San Juan, there is no doubt, throughout 150 years of documentation, San Juan Island is Fort George Island. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it up here. The Isle of Santa Maria, through all this documentation, it is Amelia Island. So right in there between San Juan Island and Santa Maria, Fort George Island and Amelia Island is the Isle of Sarabay. Okay? So, in terms of modern landscape, definitely only be one or two places. It can either be Big Talbot Island or the really northern part of Little Talbot Island. Most of Little Talbot Island was just like a sandspit. It was not, really anything habitable. So it's been suspected. So the work that I'm doing, I'm not the first one to come up with the idea. I'm building off other people who have said this in the past, that Sarabay was likely on Big Talbot Island. What's interesting, so this map is probably about 1705. 100 years earlier, 1609, a pilot is basically charting a boat from St. Augustine all the way up to Chesapeake Bay. And they basically record everything. These are the various rivers, the sounds, they're giving them names if they don't have them. And when they get to the mouth of the St. Johns River, first island is San Juan, the next island is Sarabay, the next island is Santa Maria. So we see this kind of continuous over a 100-year period. So we have this kind of little bit of information from the French, a little bit from the Spanish. We have some cartographic evidence that really strongly suggests that Sarabay is going to be on Big Talbot Island. Okay? Everyone okay so far? Yeah. Good? All right. So what does archaeology have to tell us? Okay? That's kind of where we come in here at the archaeology lab. So we've known some of these things here. We've learned some newer documents in recent years, but we've kind of known this basic story for a while. So back in 1998, a much younger version of myself, we decided we got a grant. We're going to do a shovel test survey of the south end of the island to start to look for Sarabay and a few other things, because really not much was known about the island. So we were out there doing this survey in 98. We did some testing in 98 and 99. Then we had like a 21-year hiatus where I was working on other projects. And then we came back in 2020, 21, 22, and 23 to focus on an area, okay? My philosophy is we really want to try to understand an area. We can't dig a bunch of little holes. We have to open up a big area. So that's what we've done over the last 4 years. Just a little quick background. So, mouth of the St. Johns River, Mayport, Fort George Island, Big Talbot Island. Okay, we're on the south end of the island. So this is kind of the south end of the island here. And you can see most of this land here, state park. A couple private out parcels. We got permission from them as well. So what we did is we dug shovel tests. So now you can see all these little dots. That means every 25 meters, okay? Every 25, in American archaeology, we use the metric system. I don't know if you know that, but we do. I think in the 70s, archaeologists thought the United States was moving to the metric system, so we're gonna set the stage. We're gonna do it. Just nobody followed us. So we're still out there doing it. So we do everything in meters and grams and all of that. So I try to remember to get it to yards. So every 25 yards, we're doing a shovel test. Okay, they're 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot. So if you have a shovel, they're roughly 2 shovel blades wide, little squares. We dig them down 1 meter, 3 feet. And then we're doing that every 25 meters and recording it. So we've done this over this area. So in doing that, I think I have some pictures here. So here's students working here. We screen all the material, we write notes, we record all the artifacts, we backfill it, then we go back to the lab, and we analyze all the artifacts. So we can find all the different kinds of artifacts from different time periods all throughout the island. And then we can look at distributions. Where is the pottery that dates to this time period? So if you look at this map here, we can shift it to this. So can you see this slight distinction in colors? So this slightly darker brown right here, that is where we're getting distribution of Indian pottery, indigenous pottery that dates to the 1500s and 1600s, all right? These are our 2 major players here in terms of pottery. If you've heard archaeologists talk before, we seem to be obsessed with pottery. It's true, but one thing about that is we don't think pottery is people, okay? They're not the same thing. We totally understand that. These now can help us. We've done so much dating and finding them in context. We can say, hey, this style of pottery, we know that it dates between roughly 1450 and 1600. So that's the pottery that Mocama are making. So we can find that in large quantities. That means there are a lot of people in that area. Around 1600, for some reason, there's a shift from that pottery type to another pottery type. It's not new people moving in, it's the Mocama themselves shifting pottery type. And what's interesting, about 10 years earlier, the Wally Indians on the Georgia coast shifted this pottery time. The Esquimaux, who are at the southern part of South Carolina shift, all right? The Yamasee shift. So there's this widespread kind of shift to this pottery style, and it's probably due to all these interaction networks that are going on. So now we know these two things are here, and it's within this darker area that those little shovel tests kind of showed, hey, that stuff is sprinkled throughout this area. And where these little darker areas are, those are concentrations where there's a lot of it. So we thought, oh look, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 really good concentrations, right? So in 1999, we decided we're going to focus on this concentration right here, okay? And so we started. It is now 2024, we're still in this concentration. So we have not got out of it. It is so productive, all right? All right, so you see this little blue tarp? This is a shovel test. This is one of the shovel tests. We're coming through, we're digging our shovel test. As we dug this one, we noticed there was a strong, really dark discoloration that just didn't seem right. I'm not sure what that is. So we decided, okay, we're going to continue on and do our shovel test, but let's go ahead and cover this one up and come back and maybe dig a bigger unit so we can see more. So that's what we're going to be doing. So this is after our shovel test, survey 98. That summer and the next summer, 98, 99, we start opening up around that area. Okay? I will let you know, this shovel test right here, everything I say from now on is because of that shovel test. And I will let you know, if that shovel test had been that far away, we would miss everything I'm going to talk about. Or we would likely have missed it. So, and archaeology is a game of inches. I would love to say I put it there because I sensed something, but it was totally arbitrary. So we were very lucky. And so what we're going to see here, we're going to see what that is. So now we're opening it up. So this is a map. And the way this map would look is this white area, that white, you're standing on the ground surface. Okay, so you're standing on the regular forest ground surface. The yellow is we've dug down about that far, about a foot, foot and a half. We've dug down that far. And so that area is kind of depressed on that side. So we've dug down that far, there's a plow zone that we removed, and now we get this really light, natural, kind of yellowish, yellow-brown sand. And what we see in this are all these stains. And we call these features. Now, these stains could just be uprooted trees from the past. They could be gopher tortoise burrows. They could be lots of natural things. But they could also be something cultural. Pits that were dug. Here's that shovel test. We clipped this thing right here. Okay? Just right there. And I said if we'd been right there, we would have been in between those. And what we clipped is a wall trench. So what it is they're digging a trench to a house, their house. And they have a trench, and then they put the posts within that trench. All right? And this is the door opening part of it. So it's coming in here. I have a photograph. I don't think you can see it here. Can you kind of see it coming in right here? And there's no, there's our shovel test right there, and we clipped that. We just barely clipped it. So that led us to this structure. This is a unique, novel kind of house construction. Okay? So what we're thinking, based on the construction style and what we found in this area, this is either a specialized building or it's more likely like the Lead or Holaka or the Lead family's building that's here, their house. All right? So it's indigenous. What we're finding here dates to the late 1500s. Now, right here, this is the wall. Right here on the inside part of the wall, we've already removed it. I'm going to show it here. Is a complete pot. So that is a complete pot. It's got a giant Atlantic cockle shell in it that has a hole drilled in it. And you see all these broken pieces of pottery? So this basin was put on the inside part of the structure in the late 15, early 1600, it dilapidates, composting, the forest leaf litter all built up, and then in the 1800s they're plowing it. So a plow came through and hit and broke that. So that's why it's open like that. So we're able to kind of put it back together. And so kind of here it is. So it's a great San Marcos pot. It's got this great little reed punctations and so forth. So we're getting this nice pot here, lots of pottery. We're getting probably about 15 pieces of Spanish olive jar. Okay, Spanish olive jar are these large amphora-shaped vessels that are made in Spain, and the Spanish bring them over. Initially, they're for like olive oil or grains or water. They become something that's really commonly traded or gifted, to indigenous peoples in this area. So we got some things here. So we got what looks like a really novel piece of construction, architectural construction. We're getting nice indigenous pottery. We're getting some Spanish materials, including This is a scabbard tip, so this is made out of brass. So this would be a sheath either to a dagger or a sword. So it's a little finial at the end there, decorative piece here, that's really nice. So we have that, we've had archaeologists look at it from South Carolina, and they're very, very, very convinced that it's Spanish and not French. So we have this nice piece here. We got some nails. So we have a small little nice collection of European goods as well, showing that where we are is after European contact. All right. So that's the area that we dug in 98 and 99. That blue kind of represents the structure, the building that we found. All right. So that's it. All right. So 99's over. I start working on other projects. That's when I get asked in 2016 about what's a community look like. I really started thinking we need to go somewhere and really look at that question. So I thought the best candidate is basically here. So 2020, we move out and we're about 20 yards from where we were, right? So we open up another area. Can you see how these are kind of in little like rectangles? So each one of those rectangles is 1 meter by 2 meter, 3 feet by 6 feet. So we're taking these things out in small sections, but we're putting them next to one another so it looks like it's going to be one big unit, but we're taking out in smaller units. So we're starting to work north of here. So 20 years later, I think I said 2 of them. So then the next year, so that was 2020. 2021, we're adding that little bit on it. 2022, we're adding that on it, and then 2023, we add that. So right now, this is the largest, most extensive excavation of a Timucuan village or community anywhere in Florida. So we've really put a lot into it. So we've done 124 1 by 2 meter units. I mean, this is a lot of area. So if we're going to find something, this is the way to do it. And I'm going to show you what all this work produced. All right. All right. So these are just some photographs here. So here we are, kind of starting. These are students working. This was in 2020. So that summer, field school got canceled because of COVID. But in the fall, they allowed us to have a modified version of it a couple days a week. And this was the product of it. We went through it, no problems. So you see how this looks like one big area, but we're taking it out in smaller areas. So we're trying to get down through these darker soils until we get down to this lighter soil here. When we get down to that lighter soil, we're trying to see, are there any stains that are remnants of posts or pits or any kind of place-making features? So that's what the students are doing there. That's 2020. Here it is in 2021. So that area you just saw, that area is right here. So we backfill it, all right? So this right here, every year when we finish, we backfill it. And then the next year, we find the edge of the backfill, and then we start expanding. So this is us expanding. You see some of these dark areas, I think, within that. And here our students kind of now, once we see those dark areas, we map them in like you saw earlier, and then we start excavating them individually to see what they are. Are they cultural? Are they natural? Here we are again in 2020 doing more of the same thing, okay? So these are field schools that happen every year. We just finished our field school on National Park Service land on Black Hammock Island last week. So it's a 6-week field school that we have between roughly early May to late June. And then here's our last one here in 2023. Again, we're taking out the individual units. We're getting down to this lower area. We're recording all the stains that are there. Then we're excavating them, all right? So that's what the students are doing here. So you can see we've taken all the different stains out and processed them. Right.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
I'm getting lost here. Where exactly is this excavation?
Where is it?
Where?
Big Talbot Island.
Big Talbot Island.
Yeah,
You can't see it from A1A. Okay.
Most people want to come to archaeological sites, so I'll take them to an archaeological site and they'll go, we're just standing in the woods. Because a lot of times you can't really see these things. So if you go A1A, when you first get on the island, there's a street there, Houston, Houston, it's down off of that street.
But we wouldn't want to go back there and get involved with your, mess up what you're doing.
Well, yeah, we're finished now. So if you went out there right now, it would not be cleared like this. It'd be backfilled and all this, we cleared all this area, so now it'd be all overgrown again. But, yeah.
Okay.
But this is on Big Talbot Island. So all this work has been done on Big Talbot Island. All the work that I'm talking about here is probably all within an area that's 30 yards by 40 yards. It's a small contained area. So, all that I showed you here in this one area, this is basically looking at 4 years, okay? Again, the same thing, the brown here would be the ground surface, the yellow here is gonna be about dug that deep, and these, you see all these little drawings here? Those are all the stains that we saw, okay? So each one of these stains, we give a number, we draw it, looking down a plan view, then we cut it in half, take half of that out and screen it, then we look for the profile to see what it looks like in cross-section. When we see that profile, that helps us to interpret whether it's something natural like a tree or a grove, or if it's something cultural. So we did that to all of these. You probably can't see, but there are certain things here that are showing up. So students all say I do this for dramatic effect, and maybe I do. But can you see that blue dot? See that one? That one? Starting to make a pattern.
Okay.
And so there are, so you can see, these are rotted posts to a large building. That's going around here, probably go back in here into here. So we've been working on this for 4 years, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. We also got a few other things. So that's where we're projecting it out, is to be a building, a circular building that's probably 60 to 70 feet in diameter. All right? So we've excavated 244 square meters within that area. And we have, I think, 17 posts. So we're interpreting this as a council house. I've talked to colleagues throughout Florida and elsewhere. We don't know, this is clearly a Native American structure, an indigenous building. And no one can think of what it would be beyond a council house, something this big. And if it is a council house like we are proposing, this is only the second council house that's been found in Florida. The only other one is in Tallahassee. If you go to Tallahassee, there's a park called San Luis. It's much, much larger, but this is what we have. So within the inside of it, we've got this great red dot, it's a pit, and we've got this other really unique feature that I'm going to show here. So this is this great pit, huge pit, 3 feet in diameter, 3 feet deep. This is a trench here that has 4 posts within it. So it's a really unusual structure. We're still trying to kind of grapple with what it might be. So these are the posts. So those little blue dots, I just wanted to show you that I'm not just making it up. These here are actually rotted posts. So what it is, these are pretty large. So what it is, they construct a pit that's a little bit larger so they can slide it in and they push it upright. And they all have that kind of standard look to them. So these are not trees. Trees would have a completely different kind of profile. You can straight ones, which would be pines, but they come down to a real V and have taproot, and palmettos are different as well. So there are really different structures to these. So we have, 20 of these. I'm not going to show you them all, but just to see that here's the actual post itself. So sometimes we get the hole, other times we get the hole in the post. So we have these really great stains. They're really clear. The wood itself is decomposed, but the organics have stained the soil. So we have these really great profiles to really kind of reinforce our interpretation that they are posts and not just some sort of tree or something like that. This one here is a hearth. This would be a fire pit. This is all charcoal down in here, and there's a lot of animal bone that's burned in it. So this is another feature we have. So we have these features that are fire or steaming pits. We have hearths. We have posts and post holes, all kinds of great stuff. Here's that large pit. That's another pit that I showed. That's 3 feet in diameter, 3 feet deep. Here, can you see the stain right here? And it's coming out. It's going more that way here. So this is a Gabby. Gabby's 5'10". So you can see how deep that hole is. It's massive. Inside of it, we're getting all this great pottery. We're getting animal bone, mostly deer bone. We're also getting whelk shells. And that's a small collection of it. We have, I think, 7 shark teeth within it. And what's interesting, they're from 4 different species of sharks. So it's not like these are all from the same shark's mouth. And on the very top of it, this is a gannet wing. So on the very top of this pit, it was full of all this great stuff. On the very upper part of it, we got basically what ends up being the entire wing of a gannet. And we're not sure what that means, but we know for the interior Creek Indians, when they had ceremonies, they would stir these large drinks that they had, this black drink, they would stir it with a swan feather. So we're wondering, a swan wing, not a feather, a swan wing. So we're wondering if that served the same kind of function here inside this large council house and then we have this great pit that's there. Here's the other pit. I mean, you should be able to see this. This stands right out. It's like a giant donut. You know, so we recorded that. There's a shovel to give you a size to it. So we started to take out just the stain itself. And once we took out the stain, you can see that there's a post there, a post there, a post there, and we're taking that post out. So there are 4 posts within that. We're not sure what that is. If it's some sort of platform, if it's some sort of kind of structure, but it's inside the footprint of the larger council house. So this has been a great, there weren't a lot of artifacts in it, so it was hard for us to kind of interpret it. Definitely some Native American pottery. All right, so this is kind of what we have here. There's where the structure is, 98 and 99, which we think is maybe the elite resident. Then we come over here, here's the projected out, the big structure that we have. What is interesting, right over here, when we did our shovel testing, we found very little material. I mean, lots of stuff over here, little over here. So we're wondering, is this the chief's or someone elite within the community's house? This is the council house, and council house fronted open, clean plazas. We're wondering, could this potentially be the plaza area? So what we're thinking is that maybe we've hit the actual heart, the center of the Sarabay community. So these are council houses. So these council houses would be these large structures. These are politicized and ritualized spaces within the community, all right? Even after Europeans arrive, even after they build churches, even after they're trying to convert them to Catholicism, they still have their council houses. They still have their political structure intact, all right? So they have large central fire. They didn't have the openings in there. So we really feel, I think, strongly now that we have a council house. And the other one that was found, I think we actually have more of it than they have, the one that they have. So I think this is a pretty significant kind of find. All right. Are we okay for a few more minutes? Get slides, we can get some artifacts. Like, what are we finding? Besides all that great stuff there. So,
Did you find any minions? You know, like a garbage heap?
oh, mittens. Yes,
Mittens.
yeah, we have got mittens.
Yeah, minions.
Yep. I'll show you where it was. So mittens are garbage accumulations. A lot of times when there are major constituent, or at least major visual constituent shell, we call them shell mittens. Yeah. So this is probably one of the big mistakes that we have made in archaeology is calling pottery by Spanish names. So San Pedro and San Marcos, when you see them, you think, oh, that's probably Spanish pottery. That's not. Okay. So San Pedro is the pottery. It's called San Pedro because it was first kind of found and noted at San Pedro de Mocama on Cumberland Island. But this is indigenous pottery. So San Pedro and San Marcos are native made pottery. So you can see how many we have. So we've found 14,000 pieces of pottery. But let me tell you, is those 14,000, we have a template. So we have a little square, 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. If it fits within that square, we don't do detailed analysis. We just count and weight, okay? If it's bigger than that square, then we do it. So that number is just the ones that are bigger than that square. There are another 16,000 that are smaller, that we do less detailed analysis with. So we're looking at probably 30,000 fragments of pottery. And this is indigenous pottery, Native American pottery, all right? So what's the big kind? Here's our San Pedro, okay? They're probably beginning to make this about 1450, 1420, based on the dating that we have so far. So this is, 100 more years before Europeans arrived. What's interesting about it is grog tempering. So when they're making their pots, they're getting the clay from the marsh, right? They're kneading it, they're wedging it. They will add a temper to it. So they'll add a non-plastic to it that gives it properties that it doesn't normally have. So it may help with thermal coefficiency, it may help with stickiness, it may help with other types of structural binding. So a lot of times it's sand. What they're doing here is broken pieces of pottery. So they're taking sherds like this, broken, they're just crushing them up. And then they're adding that to the pottery, and then they're wedging that in there before they fire it. So when you look at it, it's going to have these big chunks in it. And actually, that, believe it or not, that's actually better having that in there. It shares the same kind of thermal coefficient as the broader matrix, is that those are great for long distance, a long-term cooking, heavy cooking. So it has all these really kind of scientific advantages to it, okay? What's kind of interesting is people do this throughout the world. And in one instance, this is going on in Africa, the ethnographer asked, why do you break up pots and put them in there? Why are you doing that? And they said, well, it has nothing to do with thermal coefficient or anything like that. They go, this is my grandmother's pot, and I want my grandmother to be part of what I'm doing. So you can see, so sometimes we give all these great scientific rationales, which really could be true, but sometimes now it's more social or cultural. So we always have to keep those things in mind. So we have close to 8,000 pieces. A lot of this design here is actually, when they make the pot, it's still a little wet, they take a kernelless corn cob and they're pressing that into it, and it's giving this cob marking. Right? So, this is probably hard to see, but just trying to give you an idea of what we're doing. Do you see there are all those, that footprint here of all those features and stuff? So now we've kind of superimposed, okay, these are all the different units here. Based on the weight of that San Pedro, where are the concentrations within that? So I know it's hard to see and stuff, but we are trying to look at the distribution of the different kinds of pottery within the footprint of what we have and where our activities going on, what might those activities be within there. So I'm just trying to give you showing you that all this stuff I say we don't just make up, that we actually have a method to our madness. This is the San Marcos, which they convert to. So it's going to have a wooden paddle. And there's an example of it in there that has a design on it, and they take that and they press that into the wet clay after they make the pot. It helps in the forming process, and it leaves these various designs. They have one that has this circle in the center, and you can, I don't know if you can see, but you can actually see the dot right there in these. Okay, this one here, they're crossing over in all different directions. So we're doing the same thing here. Here are some of the rims. They have these really nice decorative rims. So this is really aesthetically a lot better to look at than the San Pedro. So we've got great rims that are in here. And we did the same thing, the distribution. What's interesting, San Pedro is more concentrated here. We see more of a shift kind of in another part. So we're still trying to work our way through that. We have Kelowna ware. So Kelowna ware is Indigenous made. The potters are females, right? Women are making the pottery. What's interesting about this, they are making this, the Indigenous women are making this, but they're making it in European forms. So what we start to see are mugs with handles, or pitchers, or plates with foot rings, right? So usually these are found at mission sites, and everyone says, well, they're being made for the priests, because, getting them something that they're used to. We're finding it at Sarabay, in which a priest is not living there. So we think that they're also making this and using this probably in certain kinds of contexts. We've got these great ones here. We're getting a lot of traditional kind of artifacts, lots of whelk shells. These become large, heavy pounding kinds of artifacts. We also see them work down into beads. These are little earpieces. So we get these little collier metal, the center part of them, they're using for gouges and stuff like that. So we see these things being used in traditional ways as well. We're getting stone points. Stone doesn't occur in this area, so really the limestone that we have is deeply, deeply buried. They can't get to it, so they have to go to areas of Florida where limestone or chert is at the surface or above the surface, and so that's the Gainesville area. So we get these really little. These are really little. So these are probably true arrowheads. Okay, they're also probably using fish, various other fish teeth or fish spines for tips as well. This larger one here actually dates to probably 6,000 years before the site. So they have basically found this and they're reusing it, probably within potentially a ritual context. So that has great significance to them, probably beyond the fact that it's large, that it would have been something their ancestors would have done. So we're getting Spanish olive jar. I think we're up to almost 130 pieces of Spanish olive jar. Some of it has the green glazing on it, some of it doesn't. So these are these really large amphora vessels that are made with the a potter's wheel. They're made in kilns, or much, much higher density than we see with the indigenous pottery. We're getting mahalicas, which are kind of the fine wares, the tablewares that are also being made. At this point, that they're being made in Spain and brought over later. Those Spanish will make them in Mexico City and bring them here. But these are early ones, so you can see like the blue coloring on them. Really nice plates. Again, people surprised that we're getting this at a non-mission site. So Mexican red painted, this is actually coming from Mexico. So the Spanish are bringing it from Mexico, so we have some red painted wares. We're getting charred corn cobs. We're getting small numbers of glass, not a lot, but a small number of glass. And then we have these two really great indigenous made tobacco pipes. So both of these are tobacco pipe bowls. This is the front part of one. It's got a little spur on it, nice little design. This one here is the back side. You can see where the stem would have went in there. And this little design right here, a little circle there, that's actually an ear. So this was an effigy. So this clay bowl would have actually had a human face kind of carved into it. And this is the ear, and that's what kids today would call a gauge in their ear. So those are very cool. And then we've gotten some images that are Catholic imagery, all right? So this is a monstrance pin. This is part of the Eucharistic adoration within the Catholic Mass. We've had this identified by a Catholic scholar to ensure that it's right. This is made out of a local shell. So these are the ribs to the shell, natural ribs. They've been kind of ground down here. But what a monstrance symbol, what it would look like, is right here. So here, this is supposed to be the consecrated host, and it's the power of God coming out of it. So this is an incredible find here. It is this big, it's razor thin. And student found it, it's still intact. I think after we found this and recorded everything and stuff, I think like a month later, we brought it to Tallahassee. I brought it to Tallahassee. I didn't want it to break on my watch, so they have it in the front of the curation area because it is so thin, but it is incredible. And then we found, our first religious medal. So this is St. Teresa de Avila. She's not canonized until 1620. And once again, Catholic scholars think this could be one of the earliest batches of medals for her. So this is probably helping us to say this area dates to about 1620s. All right, so that's been a great find here. So this is the same one, it's just the obverse and front and back sides of them. So it's got a nice little cross there into the halo. Really, really nice. It's tiny, but an incredible kind of find here. One other piece of kind of religious imagery is this right here. I don't know if you can see it, but there's something right in here. There's a circle here, and they got these little wedges that they're drawing. I think they're practicing drawing something. What they're drawing here, these are crosses. And this is, yes, of course, this is going to be Photoshop, but I'm not embellishing. You can come up here and see that that's faithfully looking at those incisions. So you have one here, you have one here, and then on the other side of it, looks like you have these areas where they're practicing here as well. So this is on a piece of pottery in which they're doing this. One thing we need to keep in mind with regard to European goods, I think a long time ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, archaeologists used to have these what were called acculturation models. The more European artifacts they have, the more European they're becoming. That's not true at all, okay? They are taking a lot of these things and they're incorporating these European things into their framework of doing things, all right? So and that goes for the religious things as well. A lot of times they are probably really interested in the spiritual beliefs of others, and they'll adopt aspects of those that kind of align with theirs and utilize that as well. So I think that a lot of times that's what they're doing with some of this imagery here. Eventually, maybe some of them are becoming really more converted, but a lot of times we see these records early on that hundreds and hundreds are being converted each day. And likely they don't even know what this really means when you're sprinkling water on them. You know? They're probably saying, okay, great, can I have my beads? You know, something like that. So they're really trying to grab those things in there. So we got to be kind of careful with that. So one of the biggest questions I'm always asked is, have you found any gold? And now after 30 years, I can say yes. So we have a bead here, and this bead is a glass bead, but there's a foil to it, veneer, and the veneer is gold. So it is. So we got this nice little gold glass bead here. So we got another nice piece here. So we have this nice little collection of great things that are coming out of the site. So just to kind of wrap things up here, I think we feel really confident. It's taken me a long time to get to this point, even though I've always been trending this way, but I do think this is Sarabay. I feel really good about it. I've always been really conservative about that, but I've dispensed with that. It's a broadly distributed community. I think if we look at the work that's been done, we've done at Queens Harbor, the work that's been done at Veracruz and a couple other sites in Sarabay, is that they're really distributed linearly along the marshes. So I think I really like this drawing here that you probably have the center of the community, in which you have an open plaza area, you have a council house, probably around the fringe here you would have where the leaders of the community are, and then a series of paths and stuff leading throughout other areas where you see individual households with small garden plots and things along those lines. We do see them that they're acquiring European materials. We have the two structures, a series of pits. We have radiocarbon dates, and we can look at them, and they all kind of overlap at 95% confidence between 1450 and 1635. So really, based on the artifacts we're finding, everything we're finding, we think that we are in the part of the Sarabay that really dates roughly between 1580 and 1620. One of the problems that we have right now is that we have been somewhat myopic in that we've just focused on that one area, dug that one area. We need this now. Look at what we found in one area, but how does it compare to places way away from here so we can get individual households, right? And see how things are, how different they are. So that would be the next phase of research, is to start to find some of those shell middens that are further away, that are associated with individual households, and how does all of that material compare to what we get within the center part of the house, center part of the community. All right, like always, I have so many students to thank. I get to be this mouthpiece for all this great work that students do. A lot of times I don't think they realize how much of a contribution they really make to the archaeology and the indigenous history of this area. But I've had great field crews over the last few years. State Park, Big Talbot Island State Park, Friends of Talbot Island, the Timucua Parks Foundation, North Florida Land Trust, one of the private families out there, the Boardwalks, they've really been great. So we've had all this really great support out there. And so right now, we're trying to, the next 3 months, I'm trying to finalize the report here so that we'll have everything done with Sarabay. So that's it.
Oh.
I love that a sigh went out when you said that's it. You can now see, if you haven't already, why Dr. Ashley